the impact of the baby formula shortage. Jonathan Havens is a partner with the law firm of Saul, Ewing, Arnstein, and Lehr. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me about yet another supply chain shortage issue, and this one very important. What are some of the key disruptions that have caused the infant formula shortage as you see it?
Sure. So, we've certainly heard a lot in the news recently about drastic shortages in infant formula, and everyone has been trying to figure out, how did this happen? Did we know that this was coming? Why has it happened, and how can we prevent it from happening again? There certainly has been attention to a voluntary recall to a large supplier here in the United States. But I think, look, I'm not saying we shouldn't focus on taking a major supplier offline, but I think there's other reasons that have caused this situation and that have caused policymakers to take a hard look at, okay, how does infant formula get to shelves? Why is this shortage occurring, besides the major reason that a lot of people are pointing to, and how do we prevent it from happening again? So I'm sure we'll get into that, but
Yeah,
I
well,
think it's
you've
important to
asked the key.
understand.
You framed the key questions. You certainly have. And what is your perception, other than the situation with the domestic producer? What do you think are some of the other contributing factors?
Yeah, so infant formula is very interesting, both from a US regulatory perspective, also from a foreign manufacturer perspective, and then from a trade perspective, tariffs that apply to infant formula. So there's a couple things to understand about the US formula market. Most, 90, probably 8% of formula that is purchased and consumed in the United States is produced in the United States. And so a lot of products we're used to relying on foreign produced product that's imported into the United States. That's not the case with infant formula. That's number one. Number two, more than half of the formula that's purchased in the United States is purchased with something called WIC benefits, bought by WIC families. And so this is a program, a government program to assist women, infants, and children. That's where WIC, the acronym WIC comes from, to purchase product. And so, when you have over 50% of formula that's being purchased with WIC benefits, you might say, well, that's interesting, but how does that impact supply chain and choice for brands that you're purchasing? So one of the things that we've learned through this whole mess is that there are certain kinds of formula that are supported with, that you can purchase with WIC benefits, and others that aren't. And so when you have disruptions in the supply chain, which have been happening not just, of course, to the infant formula industry, but other products as well, it becomes problematic when maybe the formula that you can get access to is not the one that you can actually purchase because your benefits don't cover that kind of formula. So we've seen some legislative efforts to either temporarily or perhaps permanently change how you can go about using your WIC benefits. There's a whole overlay between some federal agencies and then many state agencies for kind of the WIC formulary, if you will. But part of the problem here is taking a side, producer which might have, been taken offline temporarily or have gone offline voluntarily temporarily. Maybe there's a situation where there's just normal supply chain disruptions and you can't get access to the type of formula that your state's WIC program covers. And so then you're really, you're out of luck. And so I think there's a bill that passed both the House and the Senate that was recently signed into law to give more flexibility to, the managers of the WIC program to expand the kinds of brands of formula that could be covered. Okay. So, I think that's an issue too.
That would help. I mean, because it's so domestic, so much of it is domestically sourced, we certainly can't blame container ships and international transportation for the delay, but there is a physical supply chain problem domestically as well in terms of trucking and distribution and warehousing that affects this, is there not?
Yeah, look, I think the same issues that you and I have talked about in the past that apply to the food, beverage, and agribusiness industries at large are being brought to bear on the infant formula industry as well. I would also point to the fact that while products are being produced here, that doesn't mean that all the ingredients are domestically produced, right? We know that inputs could be coming from abroad. And so I think given the transportation issues, given fuel issues, plus the fact that inputs could be coming from abroad, it all comes to a head, and we're dealing with the situation we have now.
Okay, President Biden, I understand, has invoked the Defense Production Act for at least a portion of this infant formula problem. How will that help? How has it helped, and how might it going forward?
Yeah, so the Defense Production Act is it came about in the 1950s, with the Korean War, and essentially what it does is the executive branch, the president, takes an action, and it mandates that suppliers, give resources to a particular effort, to a particular industry. In this instance, the infant formula industry. And so basically it's kind of shifting things from all general use and to a specific use, to address a specific need. And so that's what's being done here. I think, my guess is people want to know, okay, what is the Defense Production Act, and how likely is it to have to help here? And if it's likely, how quick will that happen? So it's a helpful step for sure, but it's not a quick step, right? Because diverting supply from out in the field, many of the ingredients that are in infant formula are not exclusive to infant formula. They could be going in other products, food products, beverage products. And so it's diverting them and shifting their attention to making more formula. But again, shifting ingredients from another product to infant formula is helpful, but it's not an overnight fix, as one might imagine, because then you have to get ingredients from one manufacturer to another, then you have to produce product, you have to ramp up production. So it's certainly, an arrow in the quiver, so to speak, but it's not the only thing that can and has been done to fix this. But it's certainly a helpful step.
Okay, so in the shorter term, however, what are some best practices that you might recommend for companies that are looking to mitigate supply chain related disruptions, both for infant formula and other essential materials?
Yeah, so the first one is not the best suggestion, but it's certainly one that people will be thinking about, which is diversifying your supply chain, right?
Mhm.
Having backups, having redundancy, so that you can deal with shipment times that aren't what they used to be, or pricing differences. I'm not sure that's as much of an option in this particular industry for some of the reasons that we've talked about. I think another thing is attacking it from a policy perspective, right? Going to the WIC administrators, going to the US Department of Agriculture and FDA, and saying, look, we need some flexibility here. We know you have requirements when it comes to the safety profile of these products, the ingredients, the sourcing, but really, we don't have a lot of other choice here. And so we need some flexibility. And you've seen that occur, both USDA and FDA in the recent, I would say week and a half to 2 weeks, have taken steps to ease some of the regulatory burdens so that people can get supply, because it's just not there right now. And so I think the inputs are important, and diversifying your supply chain. But because that might not also be possible, it's important to attack it from a policy or regulatory perspective to seek flexibility, so that the somewhat onerous requirements, which I'm not suggesting are bad, they keep our infants safe because of the high barriers to entry, so to speak, to get a product on U.S. shelves. But in a situation like this, is it better to dispense with some of the requirements that won't have a meaningful impact on safety, with the alternative being you can actually feed infants, which of course is a very important thing to be able to do.
Yeah, but no quick fixes. Based on your assessment of the situations as it now stands, how long are we going to have to be putting up with this, do you think, before we might see some relief?
Yeah, so I think between the actions from the White House on the Defense Production Act, plus the legislation from Congress to change how WIC is administered, to increase the ability to use WIC benefits on more brands of formula than you would have been able to previously, plus the FDA lowering some of the regulatory burdens, barriers to entry, allowing foreign imports of product that you've seen from a few different countries here, of different types of sourced formula than we've seen in the past. I know goat's milk has been discussed, which is now coming from abroad to increase the supply. I think that that's been very helpful. Plus, you have some programs through the Department of Defense, sending planes to go get product from abroad. If you combine all of these efforts, you are starting to see increased supply. Millions upon millions of cans of formula that are now coming on. You're seeing some ramping up of domestic production, some diversion of product under the DPA. So I think, look, if we're talking about ramping up domestic production, that's probably the farthest off. If we're talking about importing from abroad and helping people to purchase different kinds of formula than they were able to with their WIC benefits previously, that's a shorter term fix. So I think it's probably a couple of weeks yet before we see a meaningful influx of supply. And then domestically, I think ramping up production could be another handful of weeks.
Yeah, and we're having this conversation right at the end of May, just so our viewers can get context of that. Well, Jonathan Havens of Saul, Ewing, Arnstein, and Lehr, thank you so much for helping us to understand just what is the situation with the infant formula shortage and what are some possible solutions and when they might be brought to bear. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.